Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Stumptown. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Stumptown. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. A very creepy episode because it literally all takes place on Halloween, or at least like the day before Halloween and a little bit after Halloween. But nevertheless, okay, so there's a few things to break down. First, let's just start off with the videotape thing. That was really interesting. I was like, oh, I thought this was something specifically aimed at Betty or something. It's like, no, apparently it was aimed at everyone. It's just creepy videos of like, oh, someone's watching your front door, and it's like, okay, that's interesting. And in fact, there's so many people around town got one. At least kind of like amongst the main characters. We'll have to wait to see whether it really spreads to the rest of the town. Maybe over the course of the season, more and more people get one. But it seems like that might be set up for the new big mystery of the season, maybe? I don't know. Because he did kind of go quickly, dealing immediately with everything with Edgar and the farm and everything. So that's been dealt with. I mean, to the full extent, I don't know if there's going to be more of that trailing out for the rest of the season. Because Edgar, well, he's dead. Not unless he did fake his death, not unless there's something there on that front. But regardless, there's still the whole Evelyn situation, which I'm assuming didn't she get arrested with like everyone else anyway? You know, but I still feel like there might be more to that angle that we see trail out later on. But I mean, who knows how much of a big thing it is. But it seems like they're setting up the next big mystery. What this tape stuff involves, I don't know, because it's nothing showing anything. At first I was like, oh, are they going to showcase some like dirt they have on like Alice and Betty? But it's like, no, it was just viewing your house for a couple hours, and it's just like, yeah, just to show that I guess always have eyes on you, so whatever the hell that becomes. So there's that. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, there's the whole situation of like Kevin and Reggie messing up Honey's Principal Honey's office, which he comes in, which I think it is kind of a little creepy because the fact is Reggie was like, oh, the parking lot's empty, and the fact is he was able to pop up on them like that makes me go, maybe there's something to that, maybe not. Either way, he kind of showed a bit of a darker side this episode, just because, like, well, the fact is he was threatening Kevin. It's like, oh, you're gonna have a hard time getting into the theater school you want to because of this, and that. But it's like he rolls on Reggie, and then when he talks to Reggie, he talks about the fact is, I get it, you're trying to basically mask your pain with laughter. You're trying to make people laugh at you so they don't pay attention to your bruises because, yeah, you're being abused by your dad. I'm like, you're just so casually throwing, it's almost like you're throwing that in his face to a certain extent, and even saying like, you know, but they're not laughing with you, they're laughing at you and stuff like that. And he's kind of like clean his office and stuff like that. And when it was all said and done, Reggie spent the entire night cleaning the office, and when he's about to leave, his car's covered in toilet paper and it's smashed up, the windshield's not smashed, one of his windows, at least one of them, could have been more, but I definitely noticed the one he was looking through was smashed. And he's like, oh man, must have been some hoodlums or whatever, do you need a ride somewhere? And Reggie's like, no, I'm good. And he's like, yeah, you know, that's the whole thing, you know, messing with someone else's property. It's like, I get it, he messed up your office, but that's extreme. The fact is he would cross a line like that shows you like, yeah, I wouldn't trust this guy. Like, Weatherby kind of has his issues, sure, but going to extreme, like Honey just kind of showed kind of a bit of disturbing side, I think. So that was interesting. I just think that's a lot of like setup for some stuff later on down the road of like, kind of keep your eye on Honey. I think that's what that's kind of potentially suggesting. But what was also interesting, kind of like showing you just how crazy and twisted Riverdale is. You had people dressing up like the Gargoyle King and the Black Hood, which is interesting in many different levels because it's like, I mean, I guess on some level it makes sense because it's like, I think that happens in real life where people, you know, dress up like that, but it's like, that's so fresh. Literally everything with the Black Hood literally got dealt with last season. I'm like, that's still fresh enough. And the Gargoyle King stuff is literally fresh enough. You're dealing with murders. And it's like, you know, that just shows you how effed up and morbid, you know, Riverdale is. If it's at a point that two kids show up dressed as the Gargoyle King and a Black Hood at Betty's place, which I'm sure they didn't recognize, like, oh, whatever. But it's like, your parents are so okay with that? That's super, super morbid. But I guess that just shows you how fucked up Riverdale is. That was just kind of interesting. Then there's, and since we are talking about Betty, she's looking after Jelly Bean. It's like, oh, the whole thing of like, oh yeah, we're family, in which Jelly Bean was like, well, we're all together as a family and stuff like that. But Jelly Bean's like, well, Jughead's at that school, and then you have Betty being like, yeah, and Polly's, getting deprogrammed. So, also kind of showing you the morbid humor is the fact that Jelly Bean pretended like she was laying dead on the floor, blood from her head, and she's like, oh, I got you. It's like, after everything that's going down in Riverdale, it's like, everyone's a little crazy. It's like, why the hell would you do that to Betty, especially everything that's happened, considering the fact is, well, also her dad was a serial killer. It's like, I don't know. It's just interesting. And obviously she's dealing with someone from playing this prank call, pretending to be her dad, and it's like, what the hell is up with that? I wonder, is this all supposed to feed? Because she says that she's Laurie from Halloween, which I'm not that familiar with the Halloween series. I've seen some of the movies here and there, but like I said, just to show you how ignorant I am, that's Jamie Lee Curtis's character, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think so. Regardless, I just thought that was interesting. Just what the setup of like, oh, the phone call is coming from inside it out. It was more so like a mix of different horror movies, whether it be like, probably more so Scream. There were elements of Scream in that aspect to it as well, which, to be fair, I don't remember the Scream movies that well. But regardless, I just thought that was so fascinating in itself that I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting what they were doing with Betty's story. Then obviously she has Charles there. And it's like, oh, Charles, help me track this. And it's like, oh, it tracks back to Shady Grove where Polly is. It's like, oh, Polly's the one behind this. Also, I don't know why that moment resonated with me. I had to rewind it. Was when Betty was like, because she's like, oh, pretending like it's Edgar calling. She's like, Edgar, you're alive? And Betty was like, no, bitch. I was like, I had to rewind that because that's the second time she said bitch. Because she said son of a bitch earlier. Side note, is Betty the only character I've ever... I feel like Betty might be the only character I've ever heard cuss on this show. I don't know why. It just caught my attention. Because to me, that sounded so thuggish. Her being like, no, bitch. I don't know why that hit me so hard. I was like, holy shit. Like I said, I mean, to be fair, like, we all know Betty's a thug. So it's, no surprise there. But it's just fascinating how that, like, resonated in that moment. But I don't think Polly was the one that was doing those prank calls. But it does show you that she is so invested in this whole thing. I mean, to be fair, Edgar strapped a bomb to you, but I guess she still needs to be deprogrammed. But the fact is, she was like, what? Why would you do that? It's like, she almost trying to say, like, so I don't think she is the one that, maybe she straight up did. But I just think the time is a little interesting because Charles happens to show up and helps you with your situation when Jughead can't, which I don't know, I doubt that's connected, but who knows? In a twisted sense, that could be connected, but we'll see. It might not be. It might just be like interesting timing all around in that regard, but nevertheless. But the fact is, Charles is like, like all he's ever wanted was a family, and he's like, oh, I know it's going to take time to get you trusting me and everything, but and it's like, oh, and it's like, hey, maybe you can help me out with this case of like the videotape thing, which maybe that's connected to him. I don't know. I am thinking that this might legitimately be, once again, their brother, being Jughead and, well, Jughead, Jelly Beans, and Betty's brother. Well, half-brother in both their regards. But it's that thing of, like, I don't know what, I'm assuming it is a thing of, like, maybe he grew up a little disturbed because he didn't have much of a family, but he's trying to worm his way back into their lives, so he tried to create this situation where he kind of came to Betty's rescue to a certain extent. Because we hear that he's got their phone line tapped, which is interesting because he's using government equipment and stuff for his own personal uses in a very twisted way. So it's like, maybe in a more familial sense, we're getting a bit of a fatal attraction type. I'm sure there's a more apt description to kind of go for when describing the situation, but fatal attraction is kind of the first thing that can remember. I know that's like on a different spectrum, but still, this fact is he's become so obsessed. What would be kind of another example? I guess maybe the movie called, was it The Orphan? That, I'm sure there's plenty of like horror movies that kind of fit the bill of what, is happening with Charles and that family and everything. But, we'll see what ends up happening. Maybe it will stay small like that. Maybe it won't grow into some big obsession. I doubt it. I'm sure it will grow into one, but like I said, we'll see. Then there's everything with Veronica, and it's like, oh, I was like, how's this gonna turn creepy? Like the dude that it's like, oh, he's like, oh, I'm a family man trying to get back to my family. Aren't they beautiful and everything? I was like, oh yeah. Turns out he escaped from Shady Grove, which also shows you the level of people that are at that place, ranging from people like Polly who are just brainwashed to straight up serial killers who are just mentally unstable. So that was interesting. And basically, he killed a truck driver. Like he like it's literally part of his deal as being the family man. So that was interesting. And I guess sadly, Veronica just happened to, unfortunately, I don't know. That was just interesting. And I was curious what she was doing when she was getting alcohol and everything. I was like, oh, but she ends up setting him on fire and everything. So lucky for her, things kind of ended up working out. So I was wondering, because I kept thinking like the entire time, I was like, it's gonna be something spooky, like he's a ghost or something, but it's like, no, not the case at all. It just turns out to be like a very mentally unstable guy. So there's that. Probably the most grounded aspect of this episode, because everything else is just like major weird and crazy, is, you know, everything with the gym. I did like that little wink and nod, because Veronica hooks Mad Dog and Archie up with costumes, because it's like, oh, my friend Katie Keene, which I'm like, oh, it's a nice wink and nod. If you're unfamiliar, Katie Keene is actually going to be a spin-off of Riverdale. I actually don't know when that's coming out. I don't think that's out already. I think that's coming out next year, maybe. I don't know. I remember seeing like a teaser for it. That's actually where Josie's going to be at, because like and apparently I guess the whole show is going to take place in New York, because it's just like, oh, that's my friend from New York or whatever. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I don't think it's aesthetically going to be like Riverdale. I think it's going to be probably maybe like a 90210 type, but it seems like it might be that type of feel kind of set in the Riverdale world. It's kind of what I'm getting from it. It might be more closely inclined to be more like the Archie comics, rather than, because Riverdale's Archie comics meets Twin Peaks. That might just be straight up like, well, Archie Comics meets 90210, which I'm making that reference considering the fact is I haven't actually seen the show, but you get what I'm trying to say in that regard. But nevertheless, I just thought that was kind of neat to kind of make a wink and a nod towards that. But other than that, you know, the gym is meant to be a safe place, but obviously the dude that's running drugs and stuff like that, I forgot what his name is already. It's something with something with the D. Regardless, that douchebag shows up again, even though Archie kicked all their asses last episode, but must not have been much of a hard enough ass kicking if they're like back already. They're going after this kid that's supposed to be working for them, but Archie's like, nah. But it's the whole thing of like, they can't really do anything about it because these guys are hardcore, and they're like, oh, you want to step to me, kid? Pulls out a gun, and it's like, yeah. So home dude ends up the kid dude, I don't know why I'm saying it like that. The kid ends up getting shot in the leg, which luckily that's all it was. But now Archie's in that position of like, well, what do? We open this center to make sure that people are safe, but the fact of the matter is, while that dick is running around here, it's like there's no being safe for anyone, because we can only keep the center open for so long, and all these kids have nowhere else to go. Either you stay out of his way and you hide, and even if you hide, he probably finds you and force you to work for him. So it's like you either work with him or, you know, you hide. So it's like there's not much of a choice, you know. Whereas like Archie and everyone else kind of, you know, they have a place they can call their own. They don't have to be tied to that world. But so now it turns into a thing of like Archie's kind of got in his head like, oh, maybe I'll go all vigilante and stuff like that. Did it before, maybe I'll do it again, which, you know, I mean, obviously Archie tried the vigilante thing before. Obviously the red circle thing was the most extreme angle of that, but I don't know, maybe him and Mad Dog can pull it back. I mean, to be fair, they went on vigilante last season when it came to like the gargoyles and all that, so it's gonna be interesting to see if what lane, like, is it gonna be more straight and true, which is interesting because I think I've referenced this back in season 2, maybe. I think there are comic book runs where Archie and the gang are superheroes, because there's like many different runs of the comic books of them under different circumstances. Like what happens in Riverdale, I'm sure like even like tied in like comic books or comic books that are literally like the show Riverdale, like murder mystery and stuff like that, I think have already existed beforehand. And obviously I think some are kind of like loosely tied into the TV show in the sense that they kind of take the aesthetic of the TV show and just add it to the comic books to do their own thing. But there's many different runs of Archie covering many spectrums, and I think like I said, I think there have been superhero runs, so I think that's just kind of fascinating in its own right. So like I said, I'm just curious to see what. Hopefully, they keep it, good and not go too extreme or too far. But it is the type of situation that you try to do some good, but it could come to bite you in the ass type of thing of like, because he's already got it. He's like, oh, do I recognize this? So he already knows Archie's the dude in the mask with the baseball bat that jumped him before. So, well, not really jumped them. It was just a straight up brawl, but we'll see what happens. I'm also curious because it's like, well, Veronica might be bankrolling them type of thing, or whether she's actually going to get in the mix herself, kind of get off. I mean, to be fair, she handled herself easily, so I'm curious if that's something they're potentially going to set up or not. So there's that side of thing. And then there's the whole situation with Cheryl and Tony. I have to point out, though, Tony is super... I completely forgot about that last episode. I don't even think I even talked about the fact that Tony found Cheryl over JJ's body. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot she found out about Jason. But she's super like, oh, they're sitting down and having it. But she's like super calm about it. She's like, yeah, we need to bury Jason again. I'm like, you are handling this super well. But I think it's because there's Tony. Tony's like, I'm dating Cheryl Blossom. Cheryl is not the most stable person. And I mean that in the most kind way as possible. Like, legitimately, Cheryl's got issues. I mean, when you think about everything that's associated with just the Blossom family, just everything, it's like you wouldn't be the most sane person in the first place. So I think Tony just accepted. It's like, my girlfriend's very weird, wild, a little crazy, and very eccentric. So I think she just kind of accepts it. And so it's just kind of like, I'm gonna find my way through all this madness. So it's like, yeah, we need to bury JJ. And she's like, fine. And they do. And then creepy shit starts happening. It almost seems like Nana Rose is in on all the craziness and stuff like that. But it turns out it's because there's like a creepy doll in there. I figured as much because Cheryl was super like, oh my God, maybe this place is haunted or whatever. She was too calm about it. I was like, you're fucking with Tony, aren't you? But it's, but then it's like, but part of me was also wondering, it's like, could it just be that she is just crazy enough to actually be like, oh, just kind of accept it and like, oh, it is, it's JJ's ghost or whatever. But it turns out, no, it's just, Cheryl was messing around. Tony's like, will these hauntings stop if we decide to bring Jason back, unbury him and bring him back into the house? And, it's like, oh, I'm so glad we came to such an agreement. Cheryl was too happy about all that. So that was interesting. Now she has to sit there while she's combing Jason's hair. And it's like I said, you're taking this in better strides than anyone. Because if anyone else in town found out what Cheryl was doing, wouldn't be too keen or too happy about that. So there's that side of things. Also, I thought it was pretty sweet that Tony was dressed up as Harley Quinn and Cheryl was Poison Ivy. Because at first I was like, yeah, that's like, oh, if you had a third party in all of this, you could get them to be, Catwoman and get your Gotham Sirens. So I know, like, if you're familiar with the comic books, is there anyone else that's a part of the Gotham Sirens? I just know those three. Just because I've seen pictures of it, and just because of Gotham, they're the ones kind of associate with the Gotham Sirens. I don't know beyond that, like, well, no, except for Harley Quinn. Like, there was someone else. Well, Barbara kind of filled that lane. Well, her and I'm going into a whole tangent. Regardless, it just made me immediately think of like well, because it also makes me think of the animated series because I guess they've crossed paths a lot. They're kind of a bit of a duo themselves. Maybe in the comic books, definitely in the animated series from the 90s. But it also just makes me think of the Gotham Sirens. Once again, tangent. So, but then there's the whole thing about the doll, and it's like, oh my God, this place might actually really be haunted. It's like, what the hell is up with that? But the fact is, they did set up an interesting storyline because it turns out that they weren't just twins. They were actually triplets. There was a third named Julian. What part of me wonders is, they never really talked about it, but part of me wonders, is that why Penelope was always a bit of a shithead towards Cheryl? Just because Cheryl ate Julian? Is that what that, I mean, she absorbed him. Like, obviously it was just Jason, but maybe that's what it is, that she felt like she lost her other little boy to Cheryl. I mean, maybe she just has more of an affinity for her little boy, so it would have been Jason and Julian, and maybe Cheryl still would have fell to the wayside. I don't know. I think just because of the Blossom family, the boys were always kind of treated better anyway. I mean, to be fair, like, Penelope was kind of pushed into marrying Clifford. So, them getting together and everything was more of a push in that regard. So, I don't know. So I'm curious to see what they end up doing about that, whether that's just kind of like, a haunting there, or whether there's a little bit more to it. Because her mom's not around to kind of answer those questions, but her Nana Rose is, so we'll see. And along with that, also, there is the whole Jughead thing, which I should also point out, the actor who plays Moose, because I talked about it, he's in the Netflix show Daybreak, which, if you haven't seen Daybreak, I highly recommend. It's a really good show. A lot of fun. There's actually, like, a lot of, like, heartfelt stuff to it. It's kind of my own, like, little review, but regardless. So it's kind of neat. They're like, Moose! But basically, the kids are being shitheads and are trying to get him to leave the school. I almost kind of have, when he was like, when he was telling Jughead, it's like, well, they're not calling you the Gargoyle's kid or whatever, the Gargoyle's son or Gargoyle boy or whatever. I'm like, I almost expected Jughead to kind of like post a whole bunch of shit that's happened to him over the course of this series. Like, oh yeah, I run with like the serpents and stuff like that. That's what I kind of halfway expected, but that didn't turn out to be the case. Which is interesting because that's an element we have not touched at all this season. I don't know. I wonder if that's just going to be something that kind of fades in the background, or is that just going to be like a minor thing this season? Is the serpents and the pretty poisons? They have not popped up at all. Not that, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe they were at the Halloween party she had at in the second episode, but I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and see on that. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I just thought about that because I was like, yeah, we haven't seen like Sweet Pea and stuff. So, I mean, we did see Fang, but he still kind of needs to be unbrainwashed as well. So that's a whole angle to it. But regardless, side note, the kids at that school are shitheads. I mean, I think they're meant to be like these preppy kids who think they are better than everyone. Like, it seemed like that girl was kind of looking out for Jughead, but I think it's that whole thing of like them being manipulative because like Brett is kind of like the head honcho, but then she was getting all cozy to Moose and stuff like that, but being like, oh, you should watch out for Brett. Yet she's the one that drugged Jughead. Yeah, it's like, you drugged him. It's like, I think that's crossing the fucking line. You literally drugged Jughead and you locked him in a coffin. He was literally in there for like a couple hours. He was in there like all night until like the next day when Seth Witwer's character came and opened the coffin, and it's like, and he almost locked it up. It's like, they do more extreme stuff every year. It's like, that's pretty damn extreme and morbid and fucked up. And the thing is, if it was just Brett, that's one thing. Literally all four of them were involved. I'm like, you guys suck so much ass. But then by the time Jughead gets back, it's like, oh, Moose is going, so either they did something to him or they pushed him enough to make him go like, no, I'm leaving. I'm going to go join the army like he was going to. But then the whole thing is like, well, Jughead called around a little bit, but that wasn't the case of like, so it's like, what happened to Moose? They're trying to get Jughead to leave. But part of me wonders, is that teacher actually pushing it? Like, is he kind of like a little bit of an Edgar himself? Which is interesting to say just because of the whole Edgar Allan Poe angle of what, But I'm just curious, like, is that what's going on in this, where he's kind of like pulling the strings, trying to pretend like, oh no, I have no idea what's going on. It's like, it'd be interesting if his back-to-back roles were villains, because obviously he was a villain. He was Agent Liberty on Supergirl, so I just think it'd be interesting if he ended up being a villain in this as well. Like I said, we'll see. But what was interesting is like, I know that if I ever really went missing, Betty, you'd find me. Hard cut to later on in the coroner's office, and it's like, oh, Betty and FP are looking over her body. I'm like, are they not going to, and they actually show that Jughead. I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, wow. I've had a feeling the entire time, I was like, yeah, there's got to be more to this story, but I'm like, man, I wasn't expecting him to actually show his dead body. I'm like, wow, I felt like there was a workaround this whole situation. I'm like, they must be faking Jughead's death to a certain extent, like something. Like I said, we're getting pieces at a time to this big puzzle and everything. But part of me's like, yeah, and I don't know how to explain around that thing of like, oh, he's not later on when they make it so he's actually not dead, not unless they stick with it. Which I feel like I remember seeing something like that in like because I've come across like images of the comic books or whatever, and I could have sworn I saw an image of a dead Jughead. So I don't know if this is something they're actually pulling from like a run of the comic books or something like that, or this is something specific to Riverdale. But it's like, I swear I've seen that in like the cover of a comic book was like Jughead dead or something. It's popping in my head, but I don't know if that's something I just made up myself or is that something I actually saw. Either way, that's kind of an interesting pushing it to be like, oh, Jughead did die and they found him. But then once again, Veronica, Betty, and Archie are burning clothes. Like I said, I thought it was covering something that Jughead did, but now maybe, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that whole situation. That kind of threw me for a loop because I wasn't expecting him to do it. I'm like, I mean, would they kill off Jughead? I don't know. That'd be kind of a twist. I mean, they kind of set it up to make it seem like they killed Archie, which someone had thrown that out there that they killed Archie last season, and I was like, I didn't think so. I thought he was just kind of like, his body went into shock, but, I mean, whatever the case may be. I'm curious to see where ultimately all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Stumptown. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, it's kind of interesting because it's like Ansel and Dex are taking over running the bar because it's like, oh, Gray is all with his aunt, which I think this speaks volumes about the fact is that Dex has gotten to know Gray a lot more because, I mean, because the fact of the matter is, she's like, I know he's got family here and here, but it's like, I've never heard about this aunt in all this time. So it kind of shows you that Dex thinks she knows Gray well enough, which is interesting because it's kind of complete opposite of like all those years ago, 6 years ago, when it's like, oh, just from that one night stand, he knew so much about her, yet she couldn't even remember his name, you know? So it's just kind of interesting when you think about that, but I even love they bring in Tukey to kind of run the, kind of cook at the bar because for him, he's like, oh, look at that. This is an opportunity. Like, oh, move past the food truck. I can go in to like, you know, make my restaurant and everything. And so far, I mean, it's really interesting too because it seems like he is kind of like, really good at what he does because what was the dude, he's like a basketball player or something. He's kind of impressed by the food and everything, which Tukey's kind of being excited about. I love that he's telling Ansel, it's like, oh, send over the food. He doesn't know, like, send it over to Frank, but he thinks Frank is like this big time reviewer or whatever. He's like, no, tell him it's this and then and this, and he's about to hand it over and he's like, no, but this is this, and Ansel's like, dude, just shut up and hand me the food. So I thought that was pretty neat, and I love the fact that Ansel's kind of swerving around the people. You can see Tukey's getting nervous. He's like, oh my god, the kid's swerving. It's like I don't know if the food's going to like, but you know, Ansel's kind of dodging and weaving around the crowd of people at the bar, showing that he's really good at this. Like it's, you know, that's another reason why Gray trusts him so much to kind of, you know, help out with the bar and everything. So I just thought that was kind of pretty neat. But I do love for Tukey, it's like when it's all said and done, it's like well, after the review, it's like, wait a minute. Oh, like, the fact of the matter is the streets are going to lose a little something special if he basically goes mainstream. If he gets a restaurant, like kind of the quaintness that is, you know, the food truck. But he's like, you know what? No restaurant. I'm going back to the truck. It's like, okay, so your story kind of takes you back to square one. But, you know, I get you netted some gains from the situation. But I just thought that was kind of interesting for everything to kind of come full circle. I'm going to run a restaurant. I'm going to leave this truck behind. I've grown too big. Oh, never mind. Forget the restaurant. I'm exactly where I need to be. It's where I began and it is where I shall be. So there's that. But diving into the other main parts of this episode, I actually think it's kind of interesting. Like, this whole situation with Kane. I think this episode kind of gave you a real bigger scope of learning a little bit about Kane. Because the fact of the matter is he beat the shit out of that dude who was just talking about, like, hey, man, do we really need to be rushing his job? Because, it's like, because a lot of the other two that were working this along with Gray were kind of reluctant to do this job. They were just kind of like trying to bail out. But obviously, Kane was basically, he's under time restraints because it's like, well, he just broke out, so he can't just chill in Portland like he wants to. So it's kind of like, no, the fact of the matter is I need the job done now, which I thought was kind of interesting that Kane for Kane, he lets Gray talk to him whenever he wants to, because Gray's like, are you done shaking your ass? Because let's get this damn job done already. And he's like, I never let anyone else talk to me like that, but Gray, I don't know why I do. Which I'm wondering, does that kind of have anything to do with their history? Because him and Finney, like Gray and Finney obviously owe a debt to him, and he looked after them in prison, but I wonder, does it run a little deeper than that? Like, what in that regard, you know? I wonder, was it just a thing of they went to prison and obviously it's like, oh, you know, Kane looked after them, or what, did they have prior connections to Kane prior to them going to jail or something like that? Maybe there was a deeper reason why it's like, oh, I'm gonna look after you because you helped me out, do some jobs out there. I don't know. Because we don't know the full scope of everything that Kane is capable of. But I think that shows you that someone's willing to back out of the job. And even later on, he's getting pissed at the dude because it's like the dude wants money up front. But it's like, well, you and Finney like lost all my money. So that $500,000 that I was going to use to pay him up front, some of that to pay him up front, he's asking for that money now. So I need you to basically kill him. It's like, okay, like Gray's like, no, I'll talk to him. You just don't have to go that far. Even to the point he wanted Gray to be the one to do it. Just as like, I guess to prove Gray's loyalty to him in some shape or form. I don't know. I just thought that whole situation was kind of fascinating in its own right. Just like I said, just showing, because Kane just seems unstable. Like it's just kind of, and I think that's the reason why, Gray is so scared of him. That's why everyone's scared of him, because it's like, yeah, the fact, like I said, he beat down dudes were just, wanting to back out of the job and stuff like that. It's my way or the highway, and more so if it's my way or I kick the shit out of you type of situation. So regardless, on the other side of this whole situation is Hoffman, who's obsessed with this case, who's supposed to be on vacation in Hawaii, and I love Cosgrove calls him up and everything, and I'm like, she's at the front door, isn't she? He's like, oh yeah, I wish you could see this first time, and it's like he opens the door and there she is. That really got me. And obviously it's a situation of he's supposed to stay away from this case, but for him, this case is too personal because of the whole Darius situation. So now he's kind of stuck in that position of like, well, if he keeps investigating, he might lose his badge, which, he goes to the one person he knows because it turns out like, oh, Gray's not at a bar, but guess who's working there today? Dex is. So he goes to her to kind of tell her, well, he tries to explain to her, but he's like, you know what? Come to my apartment. I'll show you all that I got, Gray's in danger, and kind of fills in the blanks about everything. I even love this almost comedic moment of like it all, the paper, I guess because he was slamming on it, but it all kind of falls off the wall and everything. And they're just standing there for a second. He's like, please don't make me have to put that back up again. I thought that was just kind of a neat little moment. But yeah. Obviously Dex is like, okay, the fact is that Gray's not here. It must, she's kind of reluctant to believe it because for her, she's like, I know Gray so well. And it's like, oh, like the most likely the combination to the safe is someone that he cares about a lot. And, Hoffman's like, I even love her being like, yeah, I feel uncomfortable. It's like, why? Because he's like, the fact is I'm kind of like your client in this case. And I'm also a cop. And she's like, and also because we slept together, she's like, yes, so I don't feel right for us rummaging through Gray's place. But I love the thing of like she puts in a combination because it's like, oh, maybe it's it's the birthday of someone he cares about. So it's like I was kind of like, oh, so it's because she opens it. I'm like, oh, it's Dex's, isn't it? And he's like that. He's like, that's adorable. And she's like, I put my brothers in it, which makes it even more adorable. I'm like, oh yeah, he is very fond of Ansel. So that's kind of comes as no surprise. I thought that's kind of neat. But then it's like bullets in there, so I was like, yep, he definitely need to go see his aunt because if he had the gun on him, he wouldn't be, there. He wouldn't have the gun on him if he was going through an airport and whatnot. And then obviously we learned an interesting thing because obviously Gray had said like, oh, not Grand Theft Auto, but Grand Theft was what I did that last time too. Sorry, but Grand Theft is the crime that sent him away. But it turns out he's actually an explosives expert, which you would have never thought that. That was kind of interesting just to find, because I thought he was just like I figured he was some kind of thief or whatever, but I wouldn't have expected an explosive expert. It kind of makes sense because earlier someone had asked him about just blowing it up, and he's like, well, if we don't get the precise explosions, they'll basically be picking us up off the floor because we're going to be splattered. So that should have been a kind of a sign that he knows explosives, but it didn't click in my head. I thought we were kind of dealing more with a cat burglar type of thing, kind of like maybe some like Black Cat / Catwoman type of, if you, this is based on a comic book / graphic novel, so why not use comic book comic book characters kind of reference. I thought he was more like Jewel Thief like that, or I don't know what I really expected, but I wasn't expecting to be an explosive expert. Even Dex is like, wait, what? No, because it's like, yeah, he stole some stuff, but she ain't expecting to be kind of like a hardcore thief in that regard, so it kind of shows Dex that, hey, maybe I don't know Gray as well as I do. There's that whole situation of Frank going with Ansel, taking him to this little place, and obviously it's meant to push Gray to be like, yo, do what I ask you to, or your little buddy's going to be in trouble, and Gray's kind of reluctantly having to go with the flow with everything. And so luckily Ansel gives a card to the lady in the bathroom who works there, who calls Dex, which Dex immediately comes over and she's like, nah, it's all. I love that moment, her picking up the knife. I'm like, yo, and she puts the knife to the dude Frank's leg. I'm like, yo, like Dex don't fuck around when it comes to her little brother. I was like, that's an adorable situation. I mean, it's a fucked up situation, but it's still adorable and just kind of shows you like, obviously her brother means the world to her. So it's like, you come in and threaten my family, like don't do that shit, So luckily, I think, rightfully so, and I'm glad she was able to do it. She fucked Frank up, like kind of choking him out and everything. I love the dude walking. He's like, whoa. And she's like, here's some money. I'm going to need about 5 or 8 minutes. So, and you can almost see Hoffman when he kind of walked in and saw Frank. It was kind of like, good job, Dex. Cause, he's a D-back who deserves it. So, luckily, that Kane situation ended the way it did, because it was kind of interesting. I was almost wondering, because Gray isn't a killer. It's like, he even said it up front, that's not who I am. But even he was kind of being like, I'd fix everyone's problems if I killed you right now. Because it's not just Gray's particular situation, everyone, because Kane's a very, very bad dude. He's killed people. That's no surprise. I mean, that's why Hoffman's after him. He's like, you killed my friend Darius. So it's like, there's that whole thing. But rather than ending with Gray shooting him, instead he ends up shooting the other dude involved in the job in the leg. Well, Kane does. So now it ends up into a side note. I should also point it out too. I do like that because we don't have Dex in her car. The musical moments are just probably like not within the confines of the story, but just the show itself. Because when Dex is fighting Frank, there's music, and then like the chase with Hoffman. Like I said, it's kind of neat. Like I said, this is like one of the few things I pay attention to music wise. Unless I'll notice it in other cases, but more often than not, the only time I notice music apparently in TV shows is when it's a Billie Eilish song. Because I talked about it so much recently, like it always ends up being like Billie Eilish's songs. Her songs get played a lot, which I don't have a problem with. I like a lot of her songs, so I'm like, oh, because it's usually the ones they end up playing are like the ones I really like You Should See Me in a Crown or Bad Guy or what's the one? Oh, I forgot. It's the one that her album is named after. Well, it's a line in the song. It's like, where do we go when we fall asleep or something like that, because that's the name of the album, but like it's the line in one of her songs. Regardless, like I said, I'm going a bit of a tangent. It's just one of those things of like, but this is the show I'm actively noticing like them constantly playing music, because usually it plays into the theme of the episode or just whatever the theme of what's going on right now. So which it did in these particular regards too. So I thought that was kind of neat. And I like that they subtly kind of put it there. Like, it's never like the biggest thing. And I think eventually it's going to grow into a much bigger thing, is because when she's holding that dude who's bleeding, like, because Dex comes over to hold the dude's leg because he's bleeding from the wound because the bullet went straight through. But I think for her, it's a thing of like, you see her kind of flip back, like kind of a PTSD from her military days. And I think for her, it might be a thing of, because she tries to stay strong for her brother, she's never outright dealt with her issues. I mean, to be fair, it's a long list of things, because obviously that moment, there's a lot to it. It's like she lost Benny, plus, I think that's the main thing. Because that moment triggers so much, because it's not only just probably whatever she experienced over there, but it's also Benny too that triggers that, So it's a very traumatic thing that she hasn't dealt with, and she tries to deal with it her own way, mainly kind of drinking her problems away and stuff like that. But so I just think it's interesting that it is this little thing. It's not the biggest thing, but I think that's because it's just subtly showing you like, oh yeah, that is something she's literally going to have to deal with, because she's avoided dealing with it for so long that eventually it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So like I said, I'm interested to see ultimately kind of how they deal with that. But Hoffman's in that position where it's like he should kill Kane. Kane even says a psychotic thing of like, that basically, how I know that I was kind of made to be a criminal is basically because having a gun pointed at my head. And for him, it's like the thrill of it, because this is the second time today it's happened. He had a gun pointed at him, and he's talking about the fact that he's trying to push Hoffman, because he's like, oh, you won't do it. The fact of the matter is, oh yeah, I killed Darius, but it was your fault because you pushed, him into this position and everything, which obviously that's what Hoffman blames himself for, because Darius died because it's like, I put him in that position and I never should have, but I did. Because Darius was like, yo, I'm not sure about this, but Hoffman kept being like, oh, it's fine, so. And lucky for Kane, and I think lucky for Hoffman too, Lieutenant Cosgrove showed up in time to kind of make that all kind of, she was able to kind of pull him back, because I think Hoffman would never forgive himself if he crossed that line. Which I'm sure Darius's wife would have been like, why didn't you just put him down? That's, But the thing is, pulling that trigger wouldn't have brought Darius back. It would have just made him a murderer, would have made him cross that line that there was no coming back from. So I am kind of surprised. I was almost halfway expecting him to still lose his gun and badge, but I guess it's like, in the grand scheme of things, no one higher up is going to really have any complaints, because he did what they couldn't do. Even the mayor at the end kind of, celebrating him and being like, oh, is he Jewish? And Lieutenant Cosgrove was like, yeah, I don't know if he is Jewish. And then you have Hoffman looking like, I guess because of the last name Hoffman, maybe? I don't know. And then like Lieutenant Cosgrove was like, he's like, regardless, Mazel Tov. So I thought that was kind of neat. But I love, because Dex is still looking out for Gray despite everything. It's like, Hoffman, if you get the opportunity, like, go easy on Gray. And it's like, all right, sure. So he's, making up his BS excuse of like, yeah, Gray, he was my CI. And she's like, oh, he was your CI, huh? Where's the paperwork? He's like, yeah, I must have gotten lost in Hawaii. She's like, fine, whatever. She lets a lot of shit slide because she's like, whatever, who cares? Fills out the proper paperwork, he can go. I don't care. We did a good job today, so her and Hoffman are drinking together. So I thought that was kind of neat. But it was also that moment between Gray and Dex. You know, it's like the moment they're in a room alone, Dex punches him in the face because it's like, because of what you did, like Ansel could have been in trouble. Not could have been, he was in trouble. How could you dare put him in that much danger? Which, you know, once again, she doesn't play when it comes to her brother. He's her world. He's the only family she's got left. Regardless of whatever the circumstances are with their parents, whether they're gone, alive, one of them's gone, the other one's alive, whatever the case may be, her brother means the world to her. So it's like, you know that, and how can you put him in so much danger? But for him, it's like, I did everything to keep the danger away from you. I went along with everything related to Kane because I knew if I did go to the cops, it wasn't just my life in danger, I'd be putting yours in danger. So I thought if I did what he asked, he wouldn't come after you, he'd leave you alone, but he came after you as an insurance policy because Kane's the psychopath that he is. So, but I am really curious though what kind of effect this is going to have on Dex's and Gray's relationship, because it is that thing of like, I don't know him too well, so it's like, is she going to be reluctant to let Ansel be around her? It's like, yeah, he cares about you, but I think she might be pulling, I don't know. We'll see where everything kind of stands. It might be a thing of like, I'm pissed right now, but I'll forgive you, or maybe it's going to take a while for that trust to come back, because Gray's the only person she's gotten close to. Like, obviously, even Hoffman's at like an arm's length away, but Gray probably the closest anyone's gotten to Dex. Next to Ansel, like, Gray's the closest thing to both family and someone that she cares about because she keeps everyone at arm's distance, you know. So I'm curious to see what kind of effect this is going to have on a relationship. Then it's also like, what else are you not telling me? Which there's still stuff about his past he could be lying about. Like I said, I'm curious, are they going to dive into that? Because it's not like Kane's dead. He's still alive and well. But the problem is, Kane is someone who's got connections. Granted, he doesn't have the money to pay off that. But who knows? That could be something that puts like Hoffman, Ansel, as well as Dex in the crosshairs. Maybe even Gray himself to kind of pay him back, because it's like, oh, I got arrested because of you. You know, it's going to be interesting to see. Because it's interesting because the dude that was working with Gray was like, oh, like things have changed for him. That's why he's so antsy about this job, was because he's got a daughter now, you know, and it's like, you know, life changes, priorities change. Like this whole criminal stuff doesn't matter as much to him, which is interesting because Gray's kind of in a similar case because he found people he cares about, that being Dex and Ansel. So it's like he didn't want to jeopardize that. So that was his main reason for trying to want to get this job finished as soon as possible, to get back to people he cares about and get Kane as far away from them as he could, you know? There was that interesting thing of like, is there anything else you want to tell me? And he was like, I'm sorry. But Dex had found an engagement ring, or, you know, wedding ring or whatever, in one of his drawers. Now the question becomes, was that meant for Dex? Which could be a possibility. It could be a thing of like, maybe he was always waiting for the right time. Like he always felt something there, but he always put it to the side because him and Dex kind of made an agreement not to ever cross that line. So maybe there's that. But there's also, but that's one process I'm thinking of, but maybe Dex is thinking of this has something to do with the ex that he had all those years ago. It might be a thing that they were getting that close to getting married, but things didn't work out. Maybe because he got arrested because of his criminal connections and stuff like that, which begs the question, like the fact is they bring up the ex again because of the recap at the beginning, makes you think like, okay, so his ex is going to pop up in the story and maybe they'll lead to, I don't know if they'll do it, but it could be potentially like a little bit of a jealous storyline of like, oh, Dex being like, I'm not jealous, but maybe she actually is. I don't know. I mean, once again, this might be a thing of like his ex shows up and kind of Dex ends up learning a lot more about Gray than there's like, oh, maybe Gray is, because for her, she's like, Gray's worth like kind of keeping around and, you know, letting Hoffman give him a lesser sentence and everything, because it's like he's good. Like I know enough about Gray because it's like I might not know everything, but all the time she spent with him for the past 6 years, she's gotten to see who he is, who his character is, and it's like for her that's what matters most, what kind of person he is. So I think that's what kind of shifts to make me think like she'll probably end up forgiving him. Like this will be kind of like a bump in the road, but everything will be okay. But I'm still wondering, just because more so than anything it does affect Ansel, so he was kind of caught in the middle of all of this. So I even loved him being like, you sure you want? Because I think he has some idea of exactly what was going on. I mean, he had enough idea to contact Dex or whatever, but it's like, even him being like, you sure you want? I could stay here with you, because he was like, I don't want you alone with this dude, because obviously there's something going on here. You're just not telling me, you know, so. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm interested to see what ends up being the case with that ring, where things kind of go from there. And also, like I said, I doubt we're done with Kane. Yeah, he's locked up in jail, but, we'll see if that sticks. But for now, it seems like that storyline's kind of done. I also didn't talk about it at all, but also Dex, became a private eye. She got her license and everything for it. I liked that her interview was this episode. Side note, that actress, I've seen her in stuff. I want to say, wasn't she in 24? I think it was like season 7? I think that's the only season she was in. She might have been in others, but I'm pretty sure. I did like that Dax did kind of give like some like honesty, because she's giving it. It's just like, oh, what did you learn from Artie? And it's like, she had to like, honesty and blah blah blah. It's like, can we just leave it at 2? It's like, yeah, you don't want to talk about all your experiences with Artie, because they weren't all pleasant. So there's that. And it's also like, oh, why do you want to do this job? And she's like, oh, like, to help people and all that. Which for her, she finally kind of opens up to like, honestly, I'm friends with a criminal. The fact of the matter is I haven't been able to hold down a job for like the past 10 years. But the fact is I want to do this because I'm actually pretty good at it, And I think that was enough to kind of convince Janet to kind of pass her to be like, yeah, this job is totally yours. So I thought that's kind of pretty neat to see. So going forward, she will be officially acting in a private detective fashion. So that's pretty dope. So I'm interested to see kind of where the story ends up taking her, what her cases end up being like now that everything is more on the up and up and more official. I doubt too much is going to change. So like I said, I'm interested to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.